Hello, my name's Paul McCarthy with Hero Facility Services, and welcome to Facilities First. Once a month, I'm going to spend some time with facility managers from all over the country, get to know them a little bit, and hopefully help other facility managers along the way. I'd like to thank my first guest, Scott Schmidt, who's a facility manager for Dutch Bros Coffee, where he keeps those broistas slinging drinks by making sure everything is working. I
Yes,
really wanted to say that word broista. That's so cool. So, Scott, I appreciate you jumping in my treehouse.
of course, man. I'm enjoying this. I'm excited to do this. I'm a little nervous. Both our wives are nowhere near us. We do have a board op, so to speak, on this that he'll try to reel us in as much as he possibly can. So let's see how he does today.
Well, don't worry. I already warned people that if they see paper flying, then we're going unhinged.
Yep.
So, let me tell you guys a little bit about Scott. 4 facts I know about Scott. He's been around facility management for 24 years. He's a great follow on LinkedIn because of 2 things. One is positivity, and you can really see his heart in what he posts. Now, he doesn't want everybody to know this, but secretly he wants the mullet to come back in style because he really rocks them well.
Yes.
And in the 90s, he was a DJ. So tell me a little about the FCC and how much trouble you got in.
So I actually started in radio when I was 14 years old. Gotta love my dad. He was driving me back and forth in Phoenix, Arizona to go to the radio station to work. And I was one of those guys that hid in a little box in the studio, outside the studio, that was the guy that would call you and say, hey, do you have a minute for a survey? What radio stations do you listen to? What morning shows? What's your favorite time to listen during the daytime? So we had a bunch of questions, and then I would go ahead and play songs for people and the hook of songs and say, okay, we're going to play you some hooks of songs. I want to get your opinion of what you think of these songs. 1 being you love it, 5 being you can't stand it, 3 being, I can take it or leave it. And I would sit there with a old school, realistic Radio Shack tape deck, hold the microphone to it, or the phone to it, and then push the pause button to release the hook and just let it go. I would play that, push pause on it, and then I would come back and say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, and just repeat that whole thing. I would do probably 200 of those a night. That's how we created the top 10 for that week that many years ago. So that was probably 1986, I think, 1987. That's when I started in radio. One guy heard me and said, hey, I like your voice. You want to do a commercial. So I was 15 on a regional commercial, and it just progressed from there. Now, over time, the FCC, of course, they get calls and complaints from different people, and definitely got some calls on me for different things that I had done over the years, including one that was, and I don't even know if they sell this cereal anymore. It's called Grape Nuts. Mine was actually, the commercial was me and one of the female DJs where we're sitting in a kitchen type setting of kind of a theater of the mind type thing on a radio commercial. And I was sitting there crunching on grape nuts. And I was like, oh, these are good. What are these? And she's like, oh, those are ape nuts. And I go, oh, you mean grape nuts? And she's like, no, ape nuts. And then you hear a silverback gorilla in the background banging his chest. And so that actually was the first time I ever got an FCC fine on me. And so that was interesting because I was a very young kid at that point. I think I was 18 or 19 at that time. Second time was I had actually, back in the day when Beavis and Butthead were at their prime, I could do Beavis and Butthead voices all day long, especially if I'd watched the Maranathon. And I was calling up the competitors' radio stations during the morning show. And I would call them and say, hi, this is Mike. I was wondering if I could talk about whatever subject they're talking about right now. And they're like, oh yeah, let me put you through. So then as soon as they would put me on the air with that morning show disc jockey, they were like, hey, we're talking to Mike in, Bullhead City, Arizona or whatever. And Mike, what's your question? I'm like, you're a dumbass. Yeah, you're kind of stupid. And I was just going through the whole thing. Now, of course, over time, my voice has deepened and things have changed and whatnot. I can't do it as much. But that had actually transpired into 2 things. Not only a fine by the FCC for that particular radio station that I had called, but also I had at one point, I had a guy call me and asked me who was the guy that did all the voices for us on the morning show for the Beavis and Butthead stuff and Hank Hill and all those guys. And I was like, oh, it's me. And he goes, okay, well, he goes, this is Mike Judge. And I'm like, okay, no, bullshit. That's not, you can't be Mike Judge. And he's like, no. He goes, this is Mike Judge. And I'm just letting you know that our attorney is going to send you a cease and desist to quit doing these voices because other people are complaining that we're not doing them for other radio stations.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Well,
it was.
Two things I figured out about you. You're old and you're old.
Yes, I am definitely at the top of the hill looking down onto the meadow on the other side right now.
We like to call it the fourth quarter around here.
Exactly.
So, Scott, I want to congratulate you and Dutch Bros because y'all just opened your 1,000th store.
Yes,
and
in Florida.
Y'all went from a push cart to 1.3 billion last year.
Now, don't be including me into that $1.3 billion. I don't really get to see a whole lot of that, but yeah, this company is doing amazing. We actually have on the books for another 1,000 over the next 4 years.
Well, if you bring one to Melbourne, Florida, I'll be completely happy with you.
That is definitely a town that I've heard kicked around many times. There's plenty of people down there that would love for Dutch Bros to get down there. So I spread the word as much as I can. Hopefully one day we will be in Melbourne, Florida. I really feel like if my boss had a way, he would put a Dutch Bros on top of a Dutch Bros just to increase our traffic flow.
Well, we'll have to talk off the record because I've got a location right across the street from me that y'all need.
I'll get you the connection, brother.
So here's one of the cool things that I found about Dutch Bros. Y'all had a 32% year-over-year increase, and that's what I like to call my hold my beer moment. Which is going to segue me into our next topic that we're going to go talk about is we're both from Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Two things rule in Texas: Friday Night Lights and barbecue.
Yeah, you do not talk bad about sports in the state of Texas, religion, or barbecue, or the king of country music, George Strait. That's the 4 topics that you just better make sure you bring your best A game to the table, because if you talk awry about any one of those items, that's time to toe up.
Yeah, you're getting kicked straight to Oklahoma.
Yep.
So if you had to put together the perfect barbecue and beers playlist, give me your first 2 must-visit joints in Texas.
So, and I do it mainly for the science and the research. Of course, I eat a lot of barbecue, and I've actually had barbecue twice already this week. It's just how we roll in Texas. Some of my favorites, there's actually one that is in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I think it's in Arlington. It's called Colleen's, Colleens. And that place is amazing. Now, the problem lies is that they like to take off and go fishing once in a while. So you call ahead before you drive down there, because it is definitely in a traffic area. The other one is one that is kind of a sleeper one in the Central Texas area. In Belton, Texas, there's one called Sheps. And it's Schoepfs. So good luck trying to remember the spelling of that name. I'm sure it's somebody's family name for years and years and years. But that one, it's amazing. So I don't judge barbecue by the barbecue sauce. If I have to put sauce on it, that's not barbecue, that's grilling.
Yep.
So for me, Chef's actually has a really good flavor that makes it through the bark and down into the meat itself. So that is one you've got to go to, and they've had the same pit smoker for years now. So as you pull up into the parking lot, you better start get your mouth ready and your bib ready, because that smell of that smoke is out there in the parking lot, just floating around, just making you so hungry.
Oh wow, I think we've talked about living here in Florida. Finding Texas barbecue is hard, but I found one place.
Okay.
So let's jump to the next one. What are the top 2 beers to have with barbecue?
So that's where I'm going to throw you a curveball. So, of course, being a disc jockey, I also, when I was working in radio stations, I was also working at nightclubs at the time. And back in the day, the waitresses or the barbacks would actually bring me alcohol beverages and say, "Hey, so and so over there wants you to play a song. They got you this drink." So I would take it and I would throw it there back behind me where the CDs and the records were at, and stack them up for the whole night. At the end of the night, I would like turn around and I would hit 12 drinks. And beer before liquor, that whole concept, that didn't matter at 2 o'clock in the morning when we shut down the bar. And so I got to the point where one day I did my bout face, looked at all that alcohol back there, and I was like, oh my gosh, Scott, what are you doing? None of this stuff really tastes that great. So I stopped drinking, gosh, probably 25, 30 years ago. And that was the only reason why, really, is that I was just like, it doesn't really do anything for me. So now every once in a while, and my wife will attest to this, is every once in a while I will hit something, and you will find out. One time, my wife and I, Nicole, decided that she wanted to paint the kitchen cabinets for whatever reason. God love our wives. They come up with honeydew lists that you would never imagine in your own dreams. So we decided we were going to paint the cabins, and by me, or we, I meant her, and I was just the mule of the story. So she ends up saying, "Hey, let's get a 6-pack of long necks while we're doing this." And I think it was like MGD Light or something like that. I seriously drank the neck of the bottle, and I was done for the night. I was starting to drop off. It was just enough to just kind of take the edge off. And at one point, and my wife's just the opposite. My wife gets real giggly during all that drinking. So she's actually, at one point, she started taking the paint and finger painting the cabinets.
Really? So remind me next year at RIFMA when we go have drinks, I'll get you a sweet tea. The cheapest.
Oh yeah,
I've ever done.
There she goes. Nicole's popping off. Fun fact: he will get drunk as a skunk off a neck of a beer. That's how you know she's a true Texas girl too. A true Texas girl. She comes up with those funny little sayings like that. So you got to love that.
Well, now that you already stole the thunder about the King, what are the top 2 songs you'd have on that playlist?
Oh gosh, well, anytime in Texas, you got to go to the Stars at Night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. So you got to throw that one out there every once in a while just to see who actually knows the words to that song. But ironically enough, even though we're in Texas, you got to give some love to Lynyrd Skynyrd. One of my favorite bands of all time, definitely a party band, Sweet Home Alabama. If you do not know the words to that song, you probably should move to Canada. That is just a atypical Saturday barbecue kind of song where you're all just hanging out, drinking your beer, eating your barbecue, listening to the music. When that song comes on, I bet you at least half that crowd is going to be jumping in and singing at least part of it, or at least tapping their toes to it. So I would definitely throw that one out there. Any George Strait song or Willie Nelson song. Once again, if you're living in Texas and you don't know who Willie Nelson or George Strait is, you need to get a book and catch up on your reading, because those are definitely kings of country in Texas.
It should be part of citizenship of Texas. You have to take a test on it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So let's jump into the meat of it. Let's get into facilities. I know everybody knows you and I could banter all day, and we could talk about some stuff that would probably get us in trouble with the wife. But you've been in facilities for a while now. So What drew you to facilities?
So I actually went about a long way because, of course, being in radio first at one point, and back to my wife, Nicole, when we got together, we actually both brought a child to the marriage. And once we had this entire group of crazy together, I was like, you know what, this whole working 18-hour a day with the club, the commercials, the radio, the television show, all of that stuff. I was like, you know what, I need to go find a real grown-up job. So I went to work for Motorola at the time. I think within a year and a half, my entire family, aunt, mother, father, brother, cousins, me, all got laid off within a year and a half because Motorola was kind of going tank up. And so I ended up leaving there, and my dad hooked me up with his boss, had worked for Culligan. So I got in water treatment for a while. and did filtration for both residential and commercial, and every once in a while delivering bottles and bags of salt. So that was a crazy ride, but I learned a lot about water treatment. I'm actually a water treatment specialist, level 3 here in the state of Texas. And eventually my dad was retiring, and his boss at that point said, "Hey, Scott, you know about facilities and maintenance and all of that stuff. What do you think about becoming a building engineer?" And which is a separate title for facilities maintenance. And I was like, I don't know if it's anything like what my dad does. Most of the time, it looks like he's got his feet up on the desk, looking at the computer and sleeping sometimes. So yeah, I could totally do that. And so I got in there. I actually got trained by my dad as a building engineer for a while. Took on some properties, and I actually had at one point, I think it was close to 1 million square feet of space in Austin, Texas, of Class A office buildings. As my dad was walking out the door laughing and saying, "Bye, kid, it's on you now."
Mhm. Well, so you even touched on it a little bit earlier. I mean, the rapid growth with Dutch Bros. What are you finding your biggest challenge is as a facility manager?
Dutch Bros is we use some really high-end equipment. Our construction team builds some amazing buildings. So the challenges aren't even really there as far as the structure, the envelope of the building, the equipment of the building, things like that. There are little hiccups here and there, but that's standard in the facilities world. The bigger issue is that the bulk of our staff in the shops are 16 to 25 years old. So to them, they don't quite understand where we call it a walk-in. They call it, that refrigerator thingy or whatnot. They have all got their own little notes or names that they call that stuff. So I think the biggest portion of my job currently is translation of figuring out, okay, what are they calling it versus what do I call it, and how do I convey this to our facilities people? Because if I was to call you up and say, "Hey, that refrigerator thingy is not working," you'd be like, "Hey, go find somebody else because that I don't know what the thingy is or whatnot." We got one yesterday. I think it was yesterday or day before. They said something about the filtration company came out and said the Bush tank was bad in the mechanical closet. I've made so many calls trying to figure out what a Bush tank is. I finally said, "You know what? Just get a plumber out there. Let's let them look and see what they see because I don't know what the heck a Bush tank is." As many years as I've been in this business, I've never heard of a Bush tank.
Well, I think you stole my thunder on the next question because it was what's the wildest one you ever had? And that probably takes cake. But to touch on something you said, I heard this is the first time that we have 5 different generations in the working class right now.
Yes.
And we all speak a different language. And I've got a background in the restaurant industry, and I know that our language in the restaurant industry can really scare people when you start saying I'm 86 and stuff because they don't understand it. They don't
Right.
understand. Well, so let me ask you this. I'm on the facility services side, so this always fascinates me. What separates a good service facility provider for y'all? I mean, what stands out with them, the great ones?
This is I love this question because this is something that I kind of hold dear to heart, is that coming in and training with my dad. My dad was last generation building engineer, facilities management. Um, Not my dad. Love my dad with all my heart, but those guys were old, grumpy codgers. They were just like every time I talked to them, whether I was in the facility or the filtration end of it coming in as a vendor, or when I was actually working with them, they most of the time they just wanted to be left alone. Bottom dollar was a big thing to them. Now I think we've made it past that point where the bottom dollar is great. Saving money is always a key component to finding facility service peoples or any trades or vendors. But I believe more in that personality kind of concept, that connection, the relationship between people. Because if I'm rude to you, and we grew up with the concept of squeaky wheel gets the grease. Yes, that does happen. But on your end of it, if I'm the squeaky wheel, you're not going to be like, "Oh my God, Scott's calling. I don't want to deal with them. Hey, Mark, can you take this instead?" Um, I'd rather be that guy that you're like, "Oh my God, Scott's calling. Hey, bro, what's up, man? oh yeah, I'll get to that. Let me pull somebody off of this other job to come and take care of you because we've got this relationship. We got this personality together. You're going to be more apt to jump through bigger hoops and just kind of run with me on it. It goes back to the concept of the leaders versus managers. Leaders are the ones that we run together with everybody, as opposed to managers just sitting there dictating that stuff. And I think that works in the facilities world as well,
I,
is getting that personality between us going.
yeah, I would definitely have to agree with that. One of my sayings is leaders will help you grow, bosses will stunt your growth.
Yes.
There's definitely a difference. So I know facilities managers, part of your job is education, like you talked about earlier. But what's one of the things that corporate or even the staff on site, what's one of the things they really don't understand about facilities that they should?
Time frame. And that being that there's a lot of people, and it doesn't matter which generation it is, doesn't matter what gender they are or whatnot. It is straight up. There are people that think they don't understand. My wife says it amazingly, how the watch works. All they care about is the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you're working in a shop or a quick serve restaurant or whatnot, you're after the time. You don't understand why you can't tell me the time right now when there's mechanics behind it. So I think when we say, oh, there's a leak in the ground, under the ground from a fitting out there 8 feet under the ground, they don't understand that there's permits to be pulled, there's equipment to be, picked up and rented or, fueled up, safety check, the whole 9 yards. They don't understand that it doesn't get done within 4 hours. And it cracks me up because our system that we use, our CMMS, has different priorities. And one of them is same day. And I've actually had numerous times where store people, both here and at other jobs that I've been at in the past, where they'll put in repaint the building same day or this week. And it's like, whoa, there's a lot more to that than just grabbing a bucket at Home Depot, coming out and slapping a coat on. And so that's where I think that they kind of missed the mark a little bit. Not a problem or not a fault of anyone. It's just that that's how some people work.
Well, I did hear that Scott Schmidt and Superman have never been seen in the same place.
Let's go more with like Deadpool.
Deadpool.
More of a Deadpool guy. You want to see a mask over this. You don't want the handsome guy with the cape. You want a mask over this.
A face for radio. Let's just say that.
Yes, exactly.
So with technology these days, we're getting on in our fourth quarter, as we discussed earlier, but technology is rapidly changing the game in facilities. So how's that impacting you?
I think in facilities world, we actually are going to benefit from the way technology is changing and life is changing as we know it. They're speculating that 40% of the jobs in the public sector are going to be switched to AI within the next 7 years. I don't think facilities is necessarily going to be that. I think it's going to be more of a tool than a replacement, because AI is going to take the place of, not necessarily of it, but in connection or conjunction with the CMMS out there. And so it's not going to be where a person has to say, and it goes back to what we were discussing earlier. It's not, somebody's not going to have to know that an HVAC is called an HVAC. They can call it an air conditioner. They can say the thing that cools the air down, whatever they want to say it. AI is going to come in and say, okay, this is HVAC. Bam, here's your answer. And at the same time, that AI is going to look at everything for the past work orders, the past repairs, replacements, life expectancy, things like that of that piece of equipment. And it's going to predict all that stuff before it even makes it to the vendors or the trades out there. So I think AI is going to be a big tool for us and not a replacement of facilities end.
Well, it's good for you because you can also use it as a translator with your Bush thingy.
Right. The Bush tank.
Yeah, the Bush tank. So in your opinion, what's the most underrated skill a facility manager needs to have?
Patience. I think patience is something that, and it goes back to those grumpy old codgers that 20 years ago in this business, They didn't have the patience with us. They didn't have the patience with anything other than, is it 4 o'clock? For us, especially with the age group that we deal with the different personalities that are out there, patience comes in with not only them but vendors as well. Is understanding that, hey, if you communicate to me, if you call me up and say, hey, Scott, this part is out of warranty, it's 3 weeks out on it, here's an option. What options do you think of? We've got the patience, but then we also have that collaboration of kind of brainstorming or whiteboarding it to figure out what can we do to make this solution happen today or tomorrow.
That's a great point. Great point. So I'm going to give you a little bit of magical powers right now.
Okay.
So I'm going to hand you the magic wand. Scott, what is one common facility headache? If you could wave that magic wand, what would it be?
HVAC. I think that HVAC, if we could figure out a way to, um, they've done a lot of updates in it over the years, but the fact that we are so dependent upon that is unbelievable. So if I could figure out a way to come up with a magical way to eliminate HVAC and have a self-cooling building where, because of paint or exterior materials on the building or something, just to draw out that heat, almost like the what do they call it, where they take and they draw the air out of the building, run it down under the ground 10 feet, bring it back into the building, it stays a constant temperature, stuff like that. I think we're missing the mark on that, and I think that would be the one magical component I would switch out in future buildings.
Great. So I'm going to use your words and your terminology on you. Now that you're considered an old codger, what would you tell somebody new coming into facilities? What's your best piece of advice for them?
Knowledge is power. I am a big believer in knowledge. I love to read. I love to continually improve myself. My goal actually this year is to try to get at least 2 to 4 certifications, additional certifications from what I already have. Just because I think education is just an amazing thing and knowledge is an amazing thing. So for anybody, it doesn't matter if it's facilities or quick serve restaurants, I tell people, get all the knowledge you possibly can. You can never have too much of that.
You know, I tell people all the time, the one thing that you can steal and you won't go to jail is knowledge. That's very true.
Yeah.
So remember, your wife is on this.
I've seen her pop up a couple of times on there.
I'm going to ask you this question. What's next for you in your career, or what honeydews does she have you doing?
Oh gosh. We live in one of the most amazing places on the planet as far as I'm concerned. We bought 12 acres in Central Texas. It sits within a 1,400 acre neighborhood that is all high fenced with exotic animals. 23 different exotic animals run around here. So when I designed the house, I made a full front porch. It's an old ranch style house, but a barndominium. So it has a full front porch that's about 60 feet long and about 10 feet deep. You can be sitting on that porch at any given time, and all of a sudden you'll get the indigenous stuff, the turkeys, the wild hogs, the whitetails, things like that walking through. But then all of a sudden you'll see 70 antelope from India come bouncing through here. Oh. And so we have antelope, we have oryx, we have gemsbox, we have red stags, which are an amazing animal. They're the largest deer in North America before you switch to an elk. They're about 8.5 feet tall and about 850 pounds. So that's just a massive creature will come walking by. I am kind of an animal whisperer, so I keep apples on hand and I will feed those guys by hand. My wife informed me last week, she said, we got to get a fence. So honeydew list, that's on the top of the honeydew list, is get a fence around the house proper. We're not going to do the whole property, just the house itself. And I was also told to quit feeding those damn animals so close to the house. So,
okay, let's talk about the fence because we've got just a little bit of time left. Okay. So I was always told that a goal or a dream will remain a dream until you put a date on it. Then it becomes a goal. So dude, on record,
you know what? The interview is done. The interview is done. You're getting me in trouble. I can just picture Nicole's face in the other room, and you just set me up for a conversation after this interview.
Nicole, I'm trying. Scott, I tell you what, this has been a fun time, and I appreciate you coming on the show. And I look forward to talking to you more in the future. And if any of you other facility managers want to be on the show, just reach out to me. You can book an appointment. We'll talk about it, and we'll have some fun like Scott and I did today. Signing out. Peace, guys.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Paul. You have a great